All right, so we've developed, using a few elements. We use the header elements, we use the paragraph elements, or the paragraph tag, and also the anchor tag. We create a link. Let's actually use a few more common tags. So there's an image tag that we could use to actually show images here. So let's take a look at that. So let's insert an image under our Tuesday section here. So I'm going to add an IMG and closing tag. So this is going to be self-closing. That's why I have this slash and angle bracket. I could create a normal closing tag just like this if I can type it correctly. So notice this is the standard way where we open and close tags. I could do it this way. The only reason I don't need to is because there's nothing that's going to go in between here. There's no content for an image tag. Image tags are empty elements or empty tags. So in that case, again, I could do it this way, it'll work, but by convention, you normally see image tags self-closing, which means they're both opening and closing tags all in one. But image tags do have attributes. So let's actually, again, get familiar with reading documentation. Let's say I don't know how the image tag works. I'm going to search for image HTML tag. Let's see what we get in Google. Notice W3 Schools, again, great resource. Usually the first result you'll see for HTML documentation. But okay, so this is our image tag, IMG. They give you an example of how you can use it. They give you some background on what it's used for, how you actually use it. But the two main attributes you want to know about are SRC, which stands for source, and then ALT, which is stands for alternate or alternate text. So every image tag should have both of these. Browsers kind of want you to have an alt tag to be fully correct. But again, there's additional attributes that are only specific to the image tag. So the image tag has a height, has a width, also has a use map. I'm not even sure what that is, but again, if I needed to, I could look more into it. But yeah, let's kind of just get our basic image going. So I'm going to use SRC to define the actual location or path to the image. All right, so there's two ways we can go about this. You can link to something that's online already, or you can link to something that's local to your web page. So let's do it both ways. In this case, I'm going to do SRC, and let's find something to show here. So I'm going to go to the web. Let's look for golden donuts image. All right, so here's a few examples of a golden donut. Looks quite tasty. This one looks especially tasty. So I'm actually going to right-click on it, go to copy image link. So that's actually where the image is located on the web. And it's cost $100. I'm not sure if I'll pay that much for a donut, but maybe I would. I don't know. All right, so I'm just going to paste that URL here. So notice I just copied where the image lives and pasted that exact URL into my SRC attribute here. If I save that, all right, I'm going to save that and going to refresh. There we go. We got an image added to our web page. Let's say I think this is taking up too much space. It's taking over a lot of my web page. Let's make this smaller. And how do I actually go about doing that? Well, if I were looking at my documentation, I did notice there's a height and width attribute. So it looks like I can control the height and width of it. So let's actually add some attributes here. So I'm going to add a width. Let's say I want it to be 200 pixels wide. Might be kind of small, maybe 300. And then let's just do a width. Let's see what happens. So is it going to squish our image or is it going to scale it? I don't know. All right, so notice that when you only specify width, it's going to maintain your aspect ratio. So notice that this isn't like super squished. It actually scaled the height and the width. But if I want to control the height also, I should be able to. So do height. And so I want to make it, I don't know, 50 pixels for whatever reason. I save that. Again, this is an attribute. The name is height. The value is 50 pixels or px. So I'm going to refresh. Notice now it's actually squished, right? Because I actually specified both the height and width. So I'm not maintaining the original aspect ratio. Normally, you will only be setting one of these if you want to maintain that aspect ratio. So I'm going to get rid of height, and we should get back to our well-proportioned donut. Looks kind of tasty. I'm not sure what it tastes like, but it looks fancy at least. Has anyone had a $100 donut by chance?
Absolutely not.
Okay, cool. So that is how you show images. Again, this was an example of linking to something that's already online. But you can also link to something that's local to your file. So if I want to do that, Let me actually create a new folder. I'm going to call it images. And then within that, I'm going to add an image file. Let's see if I can find one off my desktop. All right, so I have one available. I can drag it over. All right, so I'm adding an image from my local machine, and it's called donut 256 PNG. So instead of linking, let's do it both ways. I'm going to keep this image there. I'm going to create a new image tag, and instead of linking to URL, I'm just going to specify that I want to go to images and then the name of my image file, which is donut256.png. Let's leave off the width for now. Let's see how it looks. I'm going to save that and then refresh. Okay, there we go. So it looks like images are inline. So notice that they're sharing horizontal space. So images are not block level. They are inline, so they could share space. Let's say I want to make this a little smaller. We could do that. Let's see if I just set a height, if that would adjust both proportions. Let's say I want to make this 150 pixels. Not sure if that's what I want. Refresh. All right, there we go. Notice it maintained the proportions. So if you specify just height or just width, your proportions will be maintained, which is kind of nice. All right, so again, this is a local image where I'm just linking to the file path versus the first one is a URL because it exists on the web already. All right, that was our image tag. Any questions on images? All right, let's get to lists, spacing, and sections. Let's go through these a little quickly, but we can add lists. Let's go to Wednesday and let's make a list. So there are two main types of lists. There are ordered lists, which is OL, and there's also unordered lists. So unordered lists. All right, so ordered lists will be numbered, as in you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's create a list here. So I'm going to say this is things, or let's say our schedule for today. And then there's going to be a sequenced list of items we're going to do. So again, both ordered lists and unordered lists use list items. So that's LI, that's the LI tag. And this is where you actually add items to your list. Let's say first we're going to open with daily check-in form. And then after that, again, this is a sequence, so it'll be ordered. We're going to do career prep. After that, we'll probably do coding challenge review. All right, you guys get the idea here. Let's do one more. After that, we'll do our lecture for a new material. All right, so if I save that, again, ordered lists will have numbers. So you can just think of them as numbered lists. If I refresh, notice that's my list right here. So again, this is my unordered list. Within that, I have list items, and each list item is a new entry in my list. But we can also have unordered lists. Unordered lists, as you might imagine, have no ordering to them. So let's say my favorite things about donuts. All right, notice that I didn't actually wrap my kind of title in a paragraph tag. Your browser will still render that text, but for organization standpoint, I should kind of wrap these in paragraphs. Again, you don't have to. Your browser will be fine without it. It knows it's text. It'll just display the text as is. But normally speaking, you want to have your text within some sort of tag, whether it be paragraphs. You also put them within divs, which we haven't talked about. Well, all right, let's create some favorite things about donuts. Well, I like that they're tasty. It's kind of generic comment. Filled with sugar. I am addicted to sugar. It's not a good thing. Let's say they are easy to hold. All right, so those are some of my favorite things about donuts. Let's see what an unordered list looks like. So I refresh. Go down. So unordered list, we'll just use bullet points. Again, there's no 1, 2, 3, 4. They're just random lists of items with no priority or ordering. There. Any questions about creating lists? All right, again, by default, browsers will take ordered lists and have a 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's, again, not something I specified. It just automatically adds those. And unordered lists will get these circle bullets in there. You can control them, but again, the controlling styling part is what CSS is meant for. So by default, my browser chose that I get circle bullets. I'm just going to live with that for now. Okay, let's get to horizontal spacing. So again, instead of having a new line character, we have something called the break line elements. So to do that, let's add some break lines. So notice, let me just do this naively. Let's say I add a bunch of new lines in my HTML document. As I mentioned before, your HTML document or your browser is not actually going to honor these new lines. So even though I added a bunch of new lines, if I save this between my two lists, notice nothing changed. There's no extra space. That's because this white space is basically ignored by your browser. If you actually do want new lines, you want to add a break line element. So notice how I format it. It's an empty element, so it has no content associated with it. Opening and closing tag all in one. And I can add a bunch of those together. So let's say I want 5 break lines. Now it should have some vertical space between my ordered list and my unordered list. So let's see that in play. Make sure I'm not lying. There we go. So we got some nice white space, if we needed it for whatever reason. Okay, kind of going along with break lines, we also have horizontal rules. I tend to like horizontal rules. I like the way they look on my webpage. So I'm going to copy a bunch. So HR, let's put an HR between each day. Just kind of divide the days and make it a little more visually separated. So HR between Wednesday and Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, Friday and Thursday, and the weekend. All right, so again, HR stands for horizontal rule, and all it's doing is adding like a vertical line to have some visual separation. So if I save this, notice I get these lines going across my page. These are block level elements, so we eat up the entire horizontal space. And again, I like the way they look. It makes it easier to pick out sections, so I'm going to keep those in there. But that's all what BR and HR are used for. Again, just to add some white space to your document. Then we have sections. So sections are important, but they're not really visually doing much. So let's add a div. Let me add a div for Friday. So I add a div here. Again, divs don't really show you much. So if I refresh this page, we won't see anything different for Friday. But divs let you kind of just organize other elements within other groups. So I said that poorly. It's just, again, it's a section within your document, not on your, not rendered to your page. So what I mean by that, if I take this paragraph and nest it within my div, the user's not going to see anything different. So if I save this, refresh, notice this is exactly the same. That div is kind of like invisible to the user, but it has meaning for you as a developer. And we'll see this especially when we get to CSS. Divs become really important for kind of targeting certain sections within your page. So, I'm gonna have multiple paragraphs here. I don't know what else we're doing Friday. No assessment. So again, we've had 2 Fridays of assessments. We'll get 1 break here. We won't have assessment. So again, this will just create 2 paragraphs, nothing fancy going on here. But this div is kind of containing these 2 elements so that if I wanted to do something to both these elements, I can do it to this div. It'll kind of control which elements I'm targeting. So again, just creating another level in the hierarchy. So this div is a parent to both of these paragraph elements. Span is the same thing. It's something invisible to the user unless you add some specific styling. But I can add a span. Let's say I want to span here. Span opening and closing. Span is inline. Div is block level. That's the only difference between span and div. Otherwise, they kind of behave the same way. So I added a span around the word JavaScript. I'm going to save that, go back to my web page. What was that? Notice this looks exactly the same. Nothing's changed about the rendering of JavaScript. But again, I could add styling that's only specific to the span. Again, we'll get to CSS. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. But again, spans and divs just give you better control over your web page when you need to do something specific to a specific section of your HTML document. But otherwise, span in this case is doing nothing at all. All right, so again, these are the main tags you're gonna run into. Again, you might run into some other extraneous ones. Again, you can read up on them. Documentation is gonna be the name of the game there. As mentioned, there's hundreds of HTML tags. So if you actually want to get a better reference, there's this is a great site. So I'm gonna rep it. It's linked on from our curriculum page also. It's htmlreference.io. Fantastic site, just gives you a list of pretty much every HTML tag. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through here. Notice there's, as I said, 300s, or at least 100 tags there. I didn't quite count. But again, if you look at them, it gives you some details. So the A tag, which we talked about earlier, it's inline versus, if you look at let's see, the body tag is a block level element. So again, just gives you inline versus block. Self-closing just means, is it empty or not? Again, you can read up more on them. So let's say there is the form tag. If I want to know more about it, great site to kind of go through. It gives you examples, you kind of mess around with it. So please play around with this on your own time to kind of learn more about HTML tags and have a reference for them. So if I wanted to see only the inline tags, I should be able to filter. That's kind of cool. Okay, so I think that's our introduction to HTML. Hopefully you guys were able to create a web page without too much effort. So we built our first HTML page. Let's get into CSS.
Sorry, Ankur, I have a quick question. You said that the div tag is kind of a block tag, not like an inline. Yep. Does that mean that it creates a break or like a line break automatically, or because it's helping build the page? Is that the difference?
Great question. Let me actually show an example of that, since I like the question a lot. So let's actually see like a div to prove that div is inline. So if I created, let's say I created 2 anchor tags. So if I did anchor 1, and let's say something, and then anchor 2, quick space, let's say nothing. Let's just create a dummy href. So they're not actually going to link to anything, but they will be underlined and look like a link. So if I do this, something and nothing should be on the same line because they're both inline. So if I do this, refresh my page, go down a little bit, notice that something and nothing, same line, because anchor tags are by default inline. But if you use block level elements, they're going to automatically separate those. So if I do that for, where'd it go? Down here. If I put these within divs, again, the div itself doesn't add anything visual to the user, but divs are block level. So if I nest both these within divs, separate divs to be clear, now these divs are going to force these onto separate lines because these 2 divs can't exist on the same line naturally because they want to eat up the entire horizontal space. So now, again, these divs don't add anything visual, but they do kind of change the layout here. So if I refresh now, notice that they go into 2 new lines. So there's a div on this line, and within that div, there's an anchor tag that eats the entire horizontal space. And then our next div eats the entire horizontal space for this line. So yeah, good question. Again, important to know the difference between block level elements and inline elements.
And just so I'm clear, in VS Code, it doesn't matter how you actually type that in. You could type all of that stuff in one line.
Yep.
You're doing it just for formatting purposes. It literally is just going to have the exact same output as you just did.
Yep.
After you finish this. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely correct. So again, I could write this on an entire one line. As I mentioned before, everything I've written here can honestly be on one single line. It's not going to be easy to read or easy to parse, visually. But yeah, if I change this all to be on one line, so I have 2 divs on one line in my document, it's not going to affect how my browser treats it. So notice it's still here. So again, your browser doesn't care about how you have white space in your document. That's totally for you as a developer to make it more readable or not readable.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great questions. No, I love the questions. All right, so that was our first HTML web page. I'm going to stop the recording.